So, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to spill my guts and tell you what led me down the path and to the ultimate destination of the ISHI Trust. Yes, I am. It's a long story. I don't want to belabor topics that are not directly related, but I think you must know me as a person. So I'll very quickly get to 1985. And then ever so quickly go from 1985 to about 2000. Then we'll slow down a bit, especially in the latter part of 2000. So I hope this is all recording. I hope you like my studio. Yeah, so pre-1985, I was made in Indiana, but I was born in California. January 44, Capricorn, Lompoc, Burpee Flowers. I'm the original flower child. Yes, my father was into photography and home movies, and we have some wonderful pictures of my first birthday at Ryan Park and the flower fields, I understand, that are still there in that area. It's been a long time since I've been back. But having said that, yes, I was the second of two children. I have an older sister that just died recently, 4 years my senior. And we had wonderful parents, by and large. I would certainly maybe have some criticism of my father, but he was basically an honest person. And my mother, I've put onto an idol, onto a pedestal, put a halo around her head, and if I attribute any of my positive aspects to my life and to my decision making, I attribute it directly to my mother. But having said that, I must give my father credit for my tenaciousness, my stubbornness. We share that trait. We just had different opinions of the world, but we weren't that far apart. They are both gone, as is my sister, as I said. So I grew up in a heavily suburban area. You just accept the environment that you're born into. It was a nice life, but there were very few vacant lots, actually. And my earliest memory is in Compton, California. Yeah, actually Compton. My first school was Abraham Lincoln Elementary School. Yeah, we moved to Southgate. My father, well, I won't go into that. Anyway, moved to Southgate, still heavily populated. Then we moved in '56 to La Mirada, and that was basically a rural area that was olive groves and orange groves that were bought by developers and had monster 1,000-home tract homes built with maybe 6 different basic models, and that's we moved in '56. We were the second people to own the house. It was a divorced couple. I remember it was $17,500. It was one of 8 models. So that's where I really grew up, and this would be in the '50s and in the '60s. And I had a very good high school. I was always quite active. I'm going into more detail than I want. So, so I worked through high school at a drive-in dairy where people drove in and brought their empty glass bottles in, and we filled their order and took their money. So I actually worked 30 hours a week all through high school, and actually in high school for the last 3 years I just was a half-time student. I would leave at lunch. And I got into cars, and I bought a Model A hot rod, and stupidly spent all my money, but certainly enjoyed the process. And concurrent with that, got into surfing with my friends. This would be just about the time of Gidget after Gidget. That's when surfing really started to catch on. Foam boards were there, Hobie, Wardy, Belzy, all the cool dudes down at Huntington Beach. I was actually a member of the San Onofre Surf Club, 61. It's a very hard membership to get. I remember it well. Would sneak in, had some wonderful days at Trestles. I remember a man coming up to me in San Onofre and wanting me to sign a petition to try to stop the San Onofre nuclear plant from being installed. So I have memories of that. I have memories of Dana Point, when there was basically nothing there but just a little lookout tower, and the bay wasn't sheltered or developed. All this I can mention because my sister and I went back in 2001 and revisited our 3 homes, and actually then went to Hawaii. Because I got involved in surfing, one of my good friends after high school graduation went to the University of Hawaii, and I was quite envious. I just went to Cerritos College, a free junior college that I could just live at home. Free education, just had to pay for books. I would ride my bike to school, decided to major in business administration. I liked economics. And he flunked out. He couldn't handle all the good times. We'll mention no names, but he set the stage for me to want to transfer my units after an associate degree to the University of Hawaii, which happened in '64. I stayed in the dormitory for 3 semesters. First year, I stayed in the dormitory. I went home in the summer and worked. I worked part-time at Minute Maid orange juice canning. Orange juice, so I was always busy. I even worked during high school. I worked on the swing shift, so you can see I've been quite active person. I was still surfing, but not nearly as much. It was just hard to work into my life. But when transferring to the University of Hawaii, that was, I think, a very good thing. I certainly enjoyed that. Don't want to spend a lot of time there, but we went back to Hawaii too. And actually, I might mention we were stuck in LA for about a week because this was September 11th, 2001. We were going to take a flight from Los Angeles to Hawaii, but we stuck it out for a week. We went to Las Vegas and Death Valley and Sequoia, and then the airports opened up, and so we scooted on back and got to see Hawaii. But yeah, same island, but I was just amazed that they have a whole infrastructure of interstates now built above. It was just the short part of Lunalito Freeway, right? I lived right by the Lunalito Freeway. God, that thing goes all the way now out to Kaimuki that way. And, so I just like to remember it the way it was. And I think surfing was more friendly at that time. And although there was problems between the groups, there wasn't such a strong, I think, heavily justified reaction, to the American Indians. Hawaiians were treated the same way. Go to the videotape, watch the movie. So then I had to deal with the military. I stayed in economics. I enjoyed it very much. I had to go an extra semester, so it was January of '66 that I actually graduated. Yeah, but I needed. I couldn't really do anything because I had the draft to deal with. Going to lose my deferment, and what I did is I ended up driving taxi for myself. And it turned out to be very productive because I had fixed expenses, except for gas. They maintained the taxi, and I had the right to drive. all maintenance for $10.50 a day, and if I leased it for the full 6 days, they would give me the car for the 7th day for free, so it essentially became my car. Really, that was very good money. I would drive drunken sailors back to the ship. I would drive tourists to and from the airport, and to the Kodak Hula show, and to all the local restaurants, and every once in a while I'd even get a tour. So anyway, yeah, that only lasted so long. The draft got on my tail. I had my pre-induction physical at Fort de Russy, and they were going to schedule me for, I think, another pre-induction physical is what they called it. But I had graduated. I'd been driving taxi for about 6 months. It was time to fly the coop, and there was a legal deal that if you missed a pre-induction physical, you could be rescheduled, I think up to 2 times. So I had a good excuse, too. I found a French couple that was sailing around the world in a 45-foot steel-hulled ketch, and they were going back to Los Angeles. So actually, they like to take an extra person on as a crew member because they had no automatic pilot, so they had to share the wheel. And we basically sailed in this. So it was a married couple and their cousin. And they spoke English poorly. So they were French, yeah. And they usually spoke in French between themselves. And it was so funny. She was so animated when she would speak in French to her friends, but when she spoke to me, she just seemed like a totally different person. But anyway, that was my excuse. It was a very interesting experience. The winds were such that we ended up in San Francisco instead. Long story short, to come back home, I had missed a reserve spot too in the Marines out of Pearl Harbor. It was in a recon group. It really wasn't appropriate for me. But anyway, I found a spot at the March Air Force Base, and this was ironic. The guy was really weird. I drove all the way out there, and he wouldn't even see me until I shaved off my beard, and then I left it like this. Not the beard, just a mustache. No, I had to shave that. So I had 2 trips out there. Finally saw me, and he says, "Well, we'll only consider you for an officer because of your college degree. We won't consider you even for a listed spot." So I went through a bunch of testing, which was quite interesting, and then a review in front of, I think, 5 officers. All this happened very good. I ended up in a very high percentile, and they... I wasn't planning to go into this much detail. So forget what I said before. This is going to be the whole story, okay? I'm in my groove here. We'll just get up to my point eventually. So anyway, the good news was I was accepted at the top of the list. The bad news was they didn't have any spots for officers at the time, and I was up to be inducted. And this was like, catch-22, the same kind of deal, So anyway, the sergeant there, he was on my side, and he kind of finally coaxed the guy to convince him that I would make a good enlisted man too. So they gave me the best spot. As an enlisted man, I was basically an aircraft loadmaster. This unit had C-124 propeller Globemaster, and I noticed the C-17 has the same term, Globemaster. If you remember the old picture, it had big clamshell doors, giant thing. It would fly at 9,000 feet at about 450 miles an hour. And really ended up flying all back to Hawaii, Vietnam. It was quite an experience. I don't want to go into the Air Force. That would be a whole thing. But it was basically a 6-year obligation after you serve your first, went through basic training and then technical training, and then went through some additional training at the base for your specific aircraft, became qualified to fly, and it was a great job. I'll leave that for another time. And when I moved to New Jersey, so this is out in California, when I moved to New Jersey, this would be 69, I was able to transfer to McGuire, and I went with then C-141s. I mean, this was a whole different deal. But again, I don't want to get into the Air Force. When I got off of active training through my sister's husband, I found a job in what was called Telemax, which was a automated reservation system at the time. I could go on to that too, but long story short, it got me a promotion back here to New Jersey. They were doing tremendously good. I might equate them to today's Yahoo. You know, great opportunity, right place, right time, had tremendous opportunities, but then Telemax made all the wrong decisions and ended up being bankrupt. And when they went bankrupt, I was engaged. By the way, I've never had a homosexual experience, nor do I care to have one at this stage of my life. Thank you very much, but I have become quite understanding and even maybe a little sympathetic with people that might be have that orientation. Some of it some may think it a virtue, some may think it not. Whatever I think, whatever people think about it, make way too much of it. It just shows, how much of a hedonistic animals we are. We really are. But now back, I guess I was at the Air Force. I was with Telemax, got promoted back here. They went out of business. I was out of work. I was able to find a nice spot with a friend to share his house that he just bought, and he was living with his girlfriend away, so I essentially had the whole first floor there. A great deal. I found all the time that I wanted to fly with the Air Force out of McGuire on these slick 141s. I ended up, when I got out in 72, I had accumulated 1,500 flying hours. There's a lot of my stuff here comes from stuff that I bought throughout the circuit. But again, I'm getting back in the Air Force, so let me get away from that. So let me speed it up because I am getting more interested in my topic. The engagement I had failed, and it was a good thing. I think that happened, and I never really had, I think, a meaningful relation after that. I've had a few relationships, but I would say all of them ended up being negative rather than positive. It's just, I think, oh, look at who's walking back there. It's just when, you end up in the later stages there, all that's left is there for a reason. So anyway, going back to the topic, I really didn't have, I had some skills, but I wasn't technical at Telemax. I really worked more with, office administration and bullshit, kind of stuff like that. So, but a friend who I had worked with at Telemax had become a employment agent, and he talked what was hot at the time, a time-sharing company, Rapid Data, and that was actually just across the street from where Telemax was in Fairfield, and taken me on, and it was through Rapid Data that I got involved into programming. I first started with Fortran, and then through Rapid Data, I got into COBOL and into what would be considered Codicil or network structured complex databases. This was then under DEC and GE, Honeywell equipment. But that was really hot. Basically, long story short, I made a couple of job hops, and I ended up in New York with NBC and their computer center, and all their DP people. Their computer center, I think, was on the 11th floor, and we were on the 10th floor, and we occupied the whole floor, and we looked out over the garden between what was then the RCA tower. Yeah, so I worked there, and they accommodated me too. They changed my work to a 4-day, 10-hour a work week. So I gave them, I ended up giving them an extra hour for that because I liked it. It just meant one less commute. So I had like 3-day weekends, and I bought a house in '75. And basically have lived in this community ever since. I changed homes in '88 to this larger, more luxurious log home. And fortunately, that career field became very beneficial. After I left, and I might mention my bio is at my website. It really just brings you up to about 2000. So anyway, I left NBC. I went with AT&T. This was pre-divestiture AT&T. I worked in Piscataway. They had 1,800 programmers out there in one giant building. And at NBC, it was a really Sperry UNIVAC environment that I became skilled in, but the market is really dominated by IBM at the time, 90+%. So it didn't matter if you weren't IBM. It didn't matter too much what you were, and your job opportunities were very limited. But AT&T kept a Sperry there just to keep IBM honest. They had so much money before divestiture, but. And I was with them 5 years before I became a consultant. Basically, it was pretty much a dead-end career on the Sperry's, although they had some interesting work for me. Eventually, when the money started getting tight, they threw the Sperry out. But they didn't throw me out. They cross-trained me into what was calling it IDMS software, which was really hot at the time. They actually paid me to go up to Framingham for a month for all this training. So, and I was just bedazzled by the sophistication of software compared to what I was working with. So I was able to, take advantage of their software and use it effectively, and become an independent consultant, where basically you just get paid by the day. And life was good. I could have sold many of myself. At the time it was hot, and life was good. But I was working in Manhattan for a long time, and then finally an opportunity came with Warner Lambert, which is just 3 miles from me. So I became a consultant with them, and I basically stayed in that career field. Other than a year, I went with Mercedes. So I have a very interesting career back there, but I don't want to bore you. So anyway, though, when it's hot, it's hot, and when it's not, it's not. And, it went dead so fast that in 1999, they kicked out the mainframes, and I looked for a spot for about 6 months, but I figured that there must be some maintenance spot. I mean, you become a caretaker, but it wasn't even worth looking, so then I called myself retired. So now we're getting up to the important spot. But actually, I've forgotten the important topic, which was 1988. So let me go back to 1988. So in 88, I was still, let's see, what was I? I was a consultant then, yes. And life was good, and I was busy. I didn't have a lot of time. My mother married, or died in '74. A big story there. And my father just could not live alone. And he was set up with a very rich widow that lived out in Palm Desert. She had a lot of money through her marriage. And that fulfilled my father's life, because it's a very different, she wasn't yielding as my mother was to my father, so they were fighting, but in a positive way, and she actually had more power because she had the money. Okay, so so he had become less dominant than he was used to, but I think he liked that, and they did a lot of world traveling, had a great time, but she had asthma, and that finally took her down, and she died. This is about '83, and then my father, again, he just couldn't live alone. He tried to find another mate in Palm Desert, but I guess he just made too many enemies there. He went on this cruise looking for a bride, and lo and behold, you find what you're looking for sometimes, and so he remarried, but this was a a lady with a hard past, basically lived in the military all her life, lived out in Salisbury on the Eastern Shore, and he was much too optimistic. He basically bought her off, and she was hesitant to get married because she had to give up her pension. Through a military pension through her husband, but anyway, the marriage didn't work. But my father was too old, and he would not divorce, so it got very ugly. But I became the recipient of all these bad feelings because he basically changed his will to get her to marry. She would have, I think, she would have married him anyway. But he changed his will to give all of his wealth, which came from Catherine, really, to Jenny, and he became regretful of that as the marriage fell apart. And what he did a handwritten will. And he made me the executor. And although he had it notarized, he only had one witness. And anyway, it's a long story. When my father had stroke, he became disabled. There was no power of attorney. I had to talk with Jenny, and it had become contentious between him and the family now for a number of reasons. Anyway, it was a very bad situation, and the will wasn't legal for two reasons. One, because it wasn't witnessed, and the other is it wouldn't have been, even if it was witnessed, it wouldn't have been legal because he basically cut her not completely, he cut her out of his stuff, and he reverted it back to myself and Gail and her kids. So that was a horrible experience, and it was about a year in a nursing home before he died. So why am I telling you that story? Well, as a result of that, then both my sister and I, we had our wills drawn up, and mine was very simple. Basically, all I did is give everything to my sister and would let her figure out what she wanted to do with it. It was no big deal, but it made it very clear what would happen. And so that's 1988 when he died. Fast forward now to, let's go to 1999. This is when I become a unemployed consultant, a consultant that doesn't have any work. My business ain't dead; it's only asleeping. And the mainframe's never coming back. And God, I'm glad I didn't try to chase technology. God forbid. I mean, when I think about what I was doing such a short time ago compared to the functionality that you have with these wireless devices now, it's a whole other world. So it would have been interesting. And I still do find technology interesting. But I don't have a economic incentive. And I made some good and some bad investment decisions over my time, but by and large I came out on the positive side. So I had accumulated quite a bit of money because I was making good money. Maybe had 3 or 4 years over 100,000, and no place to put it. So I was just investing it, and some of my investments were good. I don't want to go into that too much, but I was able to buy this home. So the first home enabled me to buy this one, and I only needed a $50,000 mortgage. I could have probably even done it without that, and I paid that off. So basically I have no debt.